My beloved brothers and sisters, every human being goes through moments of fear, uncertainty, and anxiety. True protection belongs only to Allah, and this reality is one of the most important foundations of faith. Many people in the world spend their entire lives searching for safety, security, and peace. Some believe that wealth will protect them from hardship, others believe that powerful connections or authority will safeguard them, and some put their trust in material resources like weapons, guards, or advanced systems of defense. Yet, when we reflect on life deeply, we realize that all of these forms of protection are temporary, fragile, and dependent. A wealthy person may lose everything in a single moment, powerful armies can collapse overnight, and technology that seems unbeatable today becomes outdated tomorrow. But Allah, the Lord of the worlds, is everlasting and unchanging. His power has no limits, His protection has no weakness, and His guardianship never fails. When a believer understands this, the heart becomes attached to Allah alone, because He is the only true protector who can never be overcome. The Quran and Sunnah emphasize repeatedly that no harm or benefit can reach a person without the decree of Allah. This means that even if the entire world gathers to harm you, they cannot succeed unless Allah allows it, and even if everyone gathers to benefit you, they cannot help unless Allah has written it for you. This is the essence of Tawheed in action, placing full reliance on Allah as the ultimate protector. Such reliance is not merely a concept but a way of life that changes how a believer views every situation. Instead of panicking when circumstances look dangerous, the believer rests assured that Allah is in control. Instead of being arrogant when enjoying moments of safety, the believer remembers that security itself is a gift from Allah that must never be taken for granted.
One of the most beautiful aspects of Allah's protection is that it covers every dimension of our lives. He protects our physical bodies, our faith, our dignity, our hearts, and our souls. Sometimes His protection is obvious, such as when we escape an accident or survive an illness, but often His protection is hidden. He shields us from dangers we are not even aware of, removes harm from our path before we see it, and protects us from enemies whose plots we may never discover. This hidden protection is perhaps the most comforting, because it reminds us that Allah cares for us at all times, even when we are heedless of Him.
Reflect on how Allah protects His creation in countless ways. The sun rises every day at its appointed time, the earth remains stable under our feet, the air we breathe is perfectly balanced, and our bodies function with miraculous precision. All of this is part of Allah's constant guardianship. If He were to remove His protection for even a moment, everything would collapse. Understanding this makes the believer humble, grateful, and deeply aware that safety and security are blessings that only Allah grants.
When a believer truly internalizes that protection comes only from Allah, fear of creation disappears. People may try to intimidate, harm, or threaten, but their power is nothing compared to Allah's power. The heart that is connected to Allah finds strength and peace, while the heart that relies only on worldly means is easily shaken. This is why those closest to Allah are often the calmest in the face of trials. They know that no enemy, no sickness, no hardship can touch them except by Allah's decree. And if Allah has decreed it, then within that decree lies wisdom, mercy, and benefit, even if it is hidden from human understanding.
Therefore, true protection belongs only to Allah. Recognizing this truth is the key to living a life free from fear. It does not mean ignoring practical measures or abandoning worldly precautions, but it means knowing that these measures only work by Allah's permission. Locks, doors, guards, and plans are all tools, but the real guardian is Allah. The heart that relies on Him alone is never left vulnerable, because His protection surrounds the believer in ways that no worldly force can ever match. This is the tranquility that faith brings, and it is the reason why believers walk through life with courage, serenity, and strength when they know that Allah is their protector. The examples of Allah's protection in the lives of the prophets are among the most powerful reminders that His guardianship is real, and that no matter how desperate a situation may seem, His help comes in the most perfect way. When we look back at the stories of the prophets, we find that each one of them faced circumstances where human logic could not see a way out. Yet Allah's protection turned the impossible into reality. These examples are not merely stories to be told. They are lessons for every believer, showing us how to remain steadfast and hopeful when life surrounds us with fear and difficulty. Take the story of Ibrahim, peace be upon him, when his people threw him into a massive fire as a punishment for rejecting their idols and calling them to the worship of Allah alone. From the human perspective, a fire of that magnitude would certainly consume a person, leaving no chance of survival. Yet the one who created fire commanded it directly, saying, O fire, be coolness and safety upon Ibrahim. At that very moment, what should have been destruction became comfort, and what should have been death became safety. This event teaches us that when Allah's protection surrounds you, even the elements of nature that are usually harmful can be turned into mercy. The lesson for us is that no danger is greater than the will of Allah, and no harm can touch a believer without his permission. Similarly, think of the story of Musa, peace be upon him. He was trapped with his people between the raging sea on one side and the advancing army of Pharaoh on the other. Any observer at that moment would have declared the end for Musa and his followers. There was no visible escape, yet Allah's command came at the perfect time. He ordered Musa to strike the sea with his staff, and the sea parted, creating pathways of dry land for them to cross safely. The very body of water that should have drowned them became a shield and a passage of protection. Meanwhile, the same sea that granted safety to the believers swallowed Pharaoh and his army. This story reminds us that Allah not only protects His servants, but can also turn their greatest fears into their greatest miracle. Another powerful example is found in the life of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. During the Hijrah to Medina, he and his companion Abu Bakr sought refuge in the cave of Thor, while Quraysh plotted to kill him. The enemies came so close to the entrance of the cave that Abu Bakr expressed his concern. But the Prophet reassured him with words that still strengthen believers today. Do not grieve, indeed Allah is with us. Despite the enemies being just steps away, Allah's protection veiled the Prophet and his companion, such that the enemies turned away without entering. Allah placed a shield over them through means as simple as a spider's web and a pigeon's nest, showing that His protection does not require grand displays of power. Even the smallest and weakest of creations can serve as a barrier when Allah decrees it. These examples highlight a profound truth. Allah's protection manifests in countless ways, sometimes through extraordinary miracles and sometimes through the simplest of signs. The believer must understand that just as Allah protected the prophets in their darkest moments, He can and will protect those who sincerely rely on Him today. The condition is trust, faith, and patience. Too often we panic when we cannot see a way out, forgetting that Allah's wisdom is not bound by human logic. The stories of the prophets remind us to keep our faith firm, to never despair, and to remember that help often comes at the very moment when all seems lost. The beauty of these lessons is that they are timeless. Whether you are facing enemies, financial hardship, illness, or fear of the unknown, the examples of the prophets teach us that Allah's protection is always near. He may test us with difficulty, but His guardianship never leaves the believer. Just as He protected His chosen ones in ways that astonish the world, He protects ordinary believers in ways that may remain unseen. These stories should strengthen our trust, calm our fears, and remind us that when Allah is our protector, there is truly nothing to fear. When a person firmly believes that Allah is the ultimate protector, fear of people, fear of enemies, and fear of worldly challenges begin to fade away. Human beings are naturally inclined to feel afraid of what they do not understand or of situations that appear threatening. Fear of loss, fear of humiliation, fear of poverty, and fear of harm often dominate people's lives. This fear weakens the heart, makes a person hesitant, and sometimes causes them to compromise their values. However, when the heart is filled with the conviction that Allah is in control of every situation and that no creation has power over His decree, that paralyzing fear vanishes. The believer becomes courageous, confident, and serene because he knows that no harm can reach him unless Allah has willed it. And if Allah has willed it, then it contains wisdom, growth, and reward. Consider how much of human behavior is dictated by fear of people's opinions. Many are too shy to stand for the truth because they fear rejection. Some compromise their values because they fear losing opportunities. Others remain silent in the face of injustice because they fear powerful figures. But the one who has internalized that Allah alone is the protector lives with freedom from this bondage. Such a person does not worry about who likes or dislikes them, because they know that people's acceptance is meaningless if Allah is displeased, and people's rejection is harmless if Allah is pleased. This courage is not arrogance, it is the serenity that comes from putting trust in Allah above all else. When enemies plot and threaten, their goal is to instill fear in the hearts of those who oppose them. Yet Allah tells us in the Quran that the schemes of the disbelievers will never harm the believers except with His permission. This assurance is enough to strengthen the heart of any believer. Instead of being terrified by what others may do, the believer remembers that the ultimate power belongs to Allah. This is why the prophets and their followers stood so firmly against overwhelming opposition. Their trust in Allah's protection gave them a strength that no worldly force could break. Even in personal struggles, the same principle applies. Fear of failure, fear of poverty, or fear of the future often controls people's decisions. But when a believer remembers that provision, success, and future outcomes are all under the control of Allah, these fears lose their hold. The believer still works hard, takes precautions, and uses all lawful means, but his heart is not enslaved to fear. He does his best and leaves the result to Allah, knowing that no creation can prevent what Allah has decreed for him. This attitude brings peace in times of uncertainty, courage in times of difficulty, and hope in times of despair. It is also important to understand that the absence of fear does not mean recklessness. A believer who trusts Allah's protection still takes the necessary steps to ensure safety and security, but his heart is not reliant on those steps. Locks on doors, medicines for illnesses, or strategies for success are all tools, but the believer knows that real protection is only from Allah. Therefore, even when worldly measures fail, his heart remains unshaken, because his trust was never in those means to begin with. It was always in the Creator who controls all means. Freedom from fear of people also allows a believer to live with integrity. He speaks the truth even when it is unpopular. He defends what is right even when others turn away. He worships Allah openly and sincerely without being swayed by criticism or opposition. This strength comes directly from the belief that Allah is the protector. The Prophet's companions exemplified this quality. Despite being outnumbered, persecuted, and oppressed, they carried the message of Islam to the corners of the world because they feared none but Allah. In the end, when Allah is truly seen as the protector, a person's life transforms. He walks with calmness where others panic. He speaks with clarity where others hesitate. And he stands firm where others collapse. His confidence does not come from his own strength, but from his certainty that Allah is with him. And when Allah is with you, no one can overpower you. This is the true freedom from fear, knowing that the Creator of the heavens and the earth is guarding you, and that no creation can harm you without His will. Such a heart is liberated, courageous, and at peace, for it knows that real safety is only in the hands of Allah. Instead of fearing people or circumstances, a believer shifts that fear toward Allah alone, and this shift is what transforms weakness into strength. Fear of people is often rooted in the idea that they can harm or control one's destiny. Fear of worldly circumstances is born from the thought that loss or hardship comes from random events. But when the believer understands that everything in creation operates only by the will of Allah, he realizes that fearing people or fearing events is misplaced. The only one truly deserving of fear is Allah, because He alone holds our life, death, provision, and future. This type of fear is not paralyzing or destructive. Rather, it is a positive fear that brings discipline, humility, and focus. It prevents a person from falling into sin, neglecting their duties, or becoming arrogant. At the same time, it liberates them from being controlled by the fear of creation. The Quran frequently emphasizes principle, reminding believers not to fear people but to fear Allah if they are truly believers. When a person fears Allah, it means they are conscious of His presence and power, and they avoid displeasing Him at all costs. This creates a moral compass that cannot be swayed by threats or temptations. For example, someone may face pressure to lie, cheat, or abandon their principles out of fear of losing wealth or status. But if the fear of Allah is alive in their heart, they choose integrity over compromise, knowing that losing worldly benefits is nothing compared to losing Allah's pleasure. Such strength cannot come from fearing people, it comes only from fearing Allah alone.
A believer who fears Allah does not tremble before kings, leaders, or powerful figures. History is filled with examples of righteous men and women who stood firm against tyrants, not because they had armies or weapons, but because they feared Allah more than they feared creation. The companions of the Prophet embodied this fearlessness, They faced persecution, exile, and even death, but they did not abandon their faith, because their fear of displeasing Allah outweighed their fear of harm from people. This courage is what enabled them to carry the message of Islam across the world and to remain steadfast even when outnumbered and oppressed.
At the same time, this fear of Allah is balanced by love and hope in His mercy. It is not a fear that causes despair, but one that inspires obedience and carefulness. It is like the fear a child has of displeasing a loving parent. It is born out of respect, love, and awareness of consequences, not out of terror. The believer knows that Allah is most merciful, but also just, and so he strives to avoid actions that would displease Him. This balanced fear shapes character, creates sincerity in worship, and nurtures humility in daily life. Shifting fear toward Allah alone also brings incredible inner peace. When a person no longer worries about what people will say, how they will react, or what they will do, the burden of anxiety is lifted. People's opinions and threats lose their power because the believer's heart is tied only to Allah's judgment. This allows one to worship openly, live with integrity, and pursue righteousness without hesitation. It also protects from despair in times of hardship, because the believer knows that trials are from Allah and can only be removed by Him. Instead of fearing the trial itself, the believer fears failing the test in front of Allah, which redirects their energy toward patience and trust rather than panic. Another dimension of fearing Allah is that it grants a person courage in the face of the unknown. Life is full of uncertainties. Death, sickness, financial loss, and change are always possible. For someone who fears the circumstances themselves, life becomes a constant source of stress. But for the one who fears Allah, these uncertainties are understood as part of His wisdom. Fear is not placed in the event itself, but in the possibility of responding wrongly to Allah's decree. This changes how a believer views calamities. They are no longer random misfortunes to be dreaded, but opportunities for patience, growth, and reward. Ultimately, replacing the fear of people and circumstances with fear of Allah alone frees the heart from chains and grants it true strength. The believer becomes focused on pleasing Allah rather than pleasing the world, and this makes them unshakable in their principles. Such a person cannot be bribed by promises of worldly gain or intimidated by threats of harm. Their strength lies not in themselves, but in their awareness of Allah's greatness. This is the kind of fear that protects faith, empowers courage, and brings serenity to the soul. When the believer's fear is only of Allah, they become fearless before anything else, and that is the essence of true protection. Belief in Allah's protection does not mean that life will be free of challenges, losses, or tests. In fact, one of the fundamental truths of faith is that Allah tests His servants to strengthen them, to purify their hearts, and to raise their ranks. These trials may come in the form of fear, hunger, poverty, illness, or the hostility of others. But for the believer who trusts Allah, these trials are never meaningless. They are wrapped in wisdom, even when that wisdom is hidden from our eyes. When the heart understands that Allah's protection is always present, even in hardship, it no longer views trials as abandonment, but as opportunities to grow closer to Allah and to experience His mercy in new ways. There are countless examples throughout history where people assumed that hardship was destruction, only to realize later that it was Allah's way of guiding, protecting, or elevating them. A loss of wealth might protect someone from arrogance or exploitation. An illness might awaken the heart to remember Allah sincerely. A delay in success might protect a person from rushing into pride or corruption. All of these situations, though painful, are actually forms of Allah's protection, because they prevent greater harm or bring about greater good. Without trust in Allah, a person might collapse under such trials, thinking they are abandoned. But with trust, the believer realizes that Allah's wisdom is at work, and His protection is never absent. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught us that even a thorn that pricks a believer is a means by which Allah forgives sins and elevates status. This shows that protection does not always mean preventing every difficulty, but sometimes allowing small or great difficulties that result in ultimate benefit. Just as a parent may allow a child to struggle in order to learn, Allah allows us to face challenges so that we grow in patience, resilience, and faith. What may seem like hardship in the short term is actually protection in the long term because it shields us from greater harm in this world or in the hereafter.
Trusting Allah during trials requires patience and perspective. It is easy to say we trust Allah when life is comfortable, but real trust is proven when life is heavy with pain. A person who trusts Allah reminds themselves that He has not forgotten them, that He hears every supplication, and that His timing is always perfect. Instead of asking, why me, the believer asks, what does Allah want to teach me? This mindset transforms hardship into a pathway of worship. Patience becomes an act of faith, and reliance on Allah becomes a shield against despair.
This trust also teaches the believer to focus on effort, not outcome. A farmer plants seeds and waters the land, but whether the crops grow is in the hands of Allah. Similarly, in life, we take action, but the results are always with Allah. Sometimes the outcome is what we hoped for, and sometimes it is not. Yet both are a form of protection because Allah knows what we do not. If He withholds something, it is out of wisdom. If He grants something, it is out of mercy. Trusting this truth allows the believer to find peace regardless of circumstances. Another powerful aspect of trusting Allah during trials is that it removes fear of the future. Many people live in constant anxiety, worrying about what might happen tomorrow. But if we accept that Allah's protection will always be with us, then we can stop fearing what has not yet come. We prepare, we plan, we strive, but our hearts rest in the certainty that Allah will never leave us alone. Whatever comes, He will protect us in the way that is best for us, even if that protection looks different from what we expected. The believer who lives with this trust becomes resilient. Hardship does not break them, loss does not destroy them, and fear does not control them. Instead, they become stronger with each test, because they know that Allah's protection is the constant factor in their life. This resilience is a shield against despair and hopelessness, and it allows the believer to keep moving forward with faith. In the end, trials are not signs that Allah has abandoned us, but signs that He is shaping us. Believing in His protection means accepting that every moment, whether joyful or painful, carries meaning. It means walking through hardship with patience, walking through uncertainty with hope, and walking through life with the certainty that Allah never leaves His servants unguarded. With this perspective, the believer sees every trial not as a punishment but as a hidden mercy, knowing that Allah's protection covers them in ways they may never fully comprehend. When Allah is recognized as the protector, a believer begins to live with peace and confidence that cannot be shaken by the uncertainties of life. The heart finds tranquility knowing that everything that happens is under the control of the most merciful and the most wise. Instead of being consumed by anxiety about enemies, challenges, or the future, the believer rests in the assurance that Allah's protection is always near. This peace is not a passive state of ignoring reality, but an active trust that allows one to face life's trials with calmness and courage. It is a confidence that arises not from personal strength or resources, but from the certainty that the Creator of the heavens and the earth is on one side. The person who understands this truth walks through life with serenity, even when surrounded by chaos. Others may panic when faced with difficulties, but the believer remembers that Allah is the one who guarded Ibrahim in the fire, Musa at the sea, and Muhammad in the cave. The same Allah who protected the prophets protects His servants today. This realization removes the weight of fear from the heart and replaces it with trust. Whether the believer is facing sickness, financial stress, family issues, or societal pressures, the awareness that Allah is in control transforms fear into hope. Living with peace and confidence also changes how a believer approaches everyday decisions. Instead of hesitating out of fear of failure, the believer moves forward with courage because success and failure are both in Allah's hands. If something is decreed, it will happen, and if it is not decreed, no effort can make it happen. This understanding removes the pressure of trying to control every outcome and allows the believer to focus on what matters most: effort, sincerity, and reliance on Allah. The result is a life that is not paralyzed by what-ifs, but guided by Allah knows best. This peace also reflects in the believer's interactions with others. When someone knows that their honor and dignity are protected by Allah, they do not seek validation through people's praise, nor are they crushed by people's criticism. They live with a calm heart, free from the need to constantly prove themselves. Confidence in Allah's protection gives them the ability to forgive, to show patience, and to rise above pettiness. Instead of being controlled by the fear of people's opinions, their heart remains steady because it is tied to Allah alone. This inner peace makes them a source of comfort for others, as their calmness spreads reassurance in times of difficulty. Moreover, when Allah is recognized the protector, life's uncertainties are no longer frightening. Many people live in constant worry about the future, fearing loss of wealth,
health, or loved ones. But the believer understands that no matter what lies ahead, Allah's protection is guaranteed in the best possible way. Even if the future brings hardship, it will come with the strength and support of Allah. This confidence allows the believer to face tomorrow without dread, focusing instead on doing what is right today. The knowledge that Allah never abandons His servants makes every step in life lighter and every burden easier to carry. The peace that comes from trusting Allah's protection also nurtures gratitude. Instead of focusing on what could go wrong, the believer appreciates the countless ways Allah already protects them daily, from waking up alive each morning to being shielded from countless unseen dangers. Every moment is a reminder of Allah's guardianship. Gratitude for this protection deepens love for Allah, strengthens prayer, and encourages continuous remembrance of Him. It builds a cycle of peace. The more one remembers Allah, the more one feels His protection, and the more one feels His protection, the greater the peace in the heart. Finally, living with this peace and confidence makes the believer resilient in the face of life's tests. Hardship no longer feels like abandonment, but like a path to growth. Opposition no longer feels threatening, but like a chance to prove steadfastness. Loss no longer feels like destruction, but like a door to greater blessings. This resilience is a shield against despair, because the believer knows that Allah's protection is not only about shielding from harm, but also about guiding through hardship towards something better. In conclusion, when Allah is taken as the protector, peace and confidence fill the believer's life. They live without fear of people, without anxiety about the future, and without despair in hardship. Their strength is not from themselves, but from their trust in Allah's guardianship. This gives them calmness in chaos, courage in trials, and resilience in loss. It allows them to focus on worship, integrity, and gratitude instead of being consumed by fear and worry. This is the beauty of knowing that no fear remains when Allah is your protector, because His protection guarantees that no matter what happens, you are never alone, never abandoned, and always under His care.